How are you guys doing? Today is Saturday, June 26th, 2021. This is The Elite. I'm James Sims, and for this episode, I'm going to do an individual profile on Rudy Gobert. The Elite starting center for the Utah Jazz turns 29 today, and for this episode, of course, we're going to go through all his accolades, accomplishments, and achievements that he's been able that he's accomplished since the moment he stepped into the global limelight to the moment where he is right about now, where he is turning 29. So just to give a little bit of background, if you're not familiar with Rudy Gobert, he stands at about 7'1". He has a 7'9" wingspan, so he's incredibly tall and his arms are incredibly long, which makes him one of the most formidable defensive players in the history of the game. He is a player that most recently won his he most recently won his third Defensive Player of the Year award of the last 4 years, and even in the year he didn't win, he was so incredibly close to doing it. He helped the Jazz finish with the best record in the league, so I think it's pretty necessary to give a little bit of context to give understanding as to why Rudy Gobert is one of the best basketball players in recent memory and, of course, for the rest of the NBA. So he's originally from Saint-Quentin, France. He would play for a French team, Cholet, in 2011 through 2013. He started playing for them when he was a teenager. He would get drafted to the Utah Jazz in 2013. He was taken with the 27th overall pick, and this is the 2013 draft with players like Victor Oladipo and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Those are the only two players that made the All-Star game that were drafted before him that season. And when he first made it there, he would eventually get picked by the Nuggets, and he was traded on draft night to the Jazz. And he would eventually get moved down to play a couple of D-League games with the Bakersfield Jam. And even within that 2013-14 season, in his age 21 season, in the games that he played for the Jazz, he would play 45 games in a season in which they would finish with a 25-57 record. They had the worst record in the entire NBA that season, but in that season he would average 2.3 points, just over 3 rebounds, not really doing much, shooting 48% from the field, even though they missed the playoffs. He wouldn't be really recognized for much, and not many people would know the type of player he was. But of course, he would get better over the next couple of seasons. In 2014-15, he would earn his way into the starting lineup in his second season at Utah. He would start 37 of the 82 games that he would play in a season in which the Utah Jazz would finish with a 38-44 record. They had the 11th best record in the West, the 5th worst, but they had 13 more wins than the previous season. Gobert would go from averaging 9.5 minutes to averaging 26 minutes a game. He would up his points to, he would start averaging 8.4 rebounds, 9.5 rebounds, just over an assist, and he would average at least 2 blocks a game for the very first time in his career, all while shooting 60% from the field, which is a tick up from what he did before as well. And like I said, following this season, he would start virtually every game for the Utah Jazz after. For 2015-2016, in his age 23 season, in his third season in the league, he would start 60 of the 61 matchups he would play in a season in which the Utah Jazz would finish with a 40-42 record. They would finish with 2 more wins than the previous season, and that would be the last time since Gobert has been on the team that they actually missed the playoffs. He would go on to average 5 more minutes a game, starting to average 32 minutes a game. He would average 9.1 points, which is a little bit higher than what he did before. He would average double-digit rebounds for the first time in his career, as he averaged 11 rebounds, an assist and a half. He would average 0.7 steals, and he would average 2.2 blocks. This would be the second year in a row in which he would average at least 2 blocks a game, and he was doing all this while shooting 55% from the field. Following his first 3 seasons in Utah, in which he wasn't recognized for being one of the best players in basketball, the league started to take notice in his 4th season in the league. In his age 24 season in 2016-17, he would start all 81 games in a season where the Utah Jazz would finish with a 51-31 record. They have the 5th best record in the West. They made the playoffs for the first time since 2012, since Gobert had had been drafted to the team, just to give a sense of how good they were. In that season, Gobert would up his minutes to 34 minutes a game, as this would be the first time in his career he started 80 games or anything close to that. He would see his points per game go up from 9 points to 14 points per game, all while shooting 66% from the field on the season. That's the second season in his 4-year career in which he shot at least 60% from the field. He would see his rebounds go up from 11 rebounds to 12.8 rebounds, the second season in a row in which he averaged double-digit rebounds. He also led the league in blocks with 2.6. This is the only time in his NBA career in which he led the league in blocks in a season. And following this season in which he would show the rest of the league how dominant he was on defense, he would not make an all-star this season, but he would go on to be named to the all-defensive first team for the first time in his NBA career, and he was named to the all-NBA second team for the only time in his NBA career to date, after showcasing how great he was on defense. Following this season, the Utah Jazz would end up beating the Clippers in the very first round when the Clippers still had Chris Paul, I believe. And then they would end up getting swept by the Golden State Warriors in the second round. And this is the season in which they got Kevin Durant. Just for a little bit more background, just for background. But following his first playoff run with the Utah Jazz, he would come back in 2017-2018 for his age 25 campaign. He would start 56 games, the least amount of starts he'd have since his second season in the league. But he would start all 56 of the games he'd play in a season in which the Utah Jazz would finish with a 48-34 record. They had 3 less wins than the previous season. In 2017-2018, he would average 32.4 minutes per game. You'd see his points drop down a tick from 14 to 13.5 points per game. You see his field goal percentage dip from 66 to 62, but 62 is still an incredibly high percentage shots to make. He would see his rebounds dip from 12.8 to 10.7, and he'd see his blocks dip from 2.6 to 2.3. He would not make an all-star team in 2017-2018. Regardless, he would go on to be named to the All-NBA, or he would be named to the All-NBA defensive first team for the second time in his NBA career, and he would be named the NBA Defensive Player of the Year for the very first time in his NBA career. Following that season, they would go on to beat the Thunder in 6 in the first round, and they would lose in the conference semifinals to the Rockets once the Rockets got Chris Paul and started building up their team to try to take on the Warriors. And this was a season in which the Warriors would end up winning the finals again. Following his first Defensive Player of the Year season, Rudy Gobert would come back to the Utah Jazz for his age 26 season, his 6th season with the club, or with the franchise. He would start 80 of 81 games in a season where the Utah Jazz would finish with a 50-32 record. They had 2 more wins than the previous season, finishing with the 5th best record in the West for the 3rd season in a row. In this season, Rudy Gobert would see his minutes average right about 32, but he would play 81 games for the second time in a 3-year span, showing how consistent he was. He would go on to see his scoring numbers go up to 15.9. That is the most Rudy Gobert has ever averaged in a season in his career. All this while shooting 66.9% from the field. This is the first time in his NBA career he's led the entire NBA in shooting and field goal percentage and effective field goal percentage as well. He didn't take a 3 all year. Did all this while shooting 63% from the line, the second highest free throw or the third highest free throw percentage he's ever shot from the line. He sees his rebound numbers go up to 12.9. Up until that point, the highest or the most rebounds he's ever averaged in a season. He averaged 2 assists, which is the most assists he's ever averaged in a season, alongside 0.8 steals. He would average 2.3 blocks. This would be the 5th season in a row in which he'd average at least 2 blocks a season. And after another season, after not being recognized as an all-star, Rudy Gobert would be named to the All-NBA or the All-Defensive First Team for the 3rd year in a row. He would be named to the All-NBA Third Team for the first time in his NBA career, and he would be named the Defensive Player of the Year for the 2nd year in a row. Not many players in NBA history have ever won more than one. The fact that he won it back-to-back showed that it wasn't a fluke. And not to mention, in 2019, he would go on to be named the French Basketball Player of the Year for the only time in his career, following the year in which he would win his second straight Defensive Player of the Year. Once they made the playoffs, they would actually lose in the first round to the Rockets. But following this season, he would come back to the Utah Jazz for his 7th season. And up until then, he was never even an all-star. But through his first 6 seasons in the league, he was a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 3-time All Defensive First Team. You get a sense for how good he was. And in his seventh season, his age 27 season in 2019-2020, he would start all 68 of the games he would play in a season where the Utah Jazz finished with a 44-28 record. That was the 6th best record in the West. This was a season that was heavily impacted by COVID-19, in which it would delay the end of the season. But before the season was delayed, Rudy Gobert would get named to his first ever career All-Star game in his age 27 season. By the end of the season, he would average 34 minutes a game. That's the most minutes that Rudy Gobert would ever average in a season ever. He would average 15.1 points per game. The second time in his career he'd average 15 points per game in a season. He'd shoot 69.3% from the field, which is the highest field goal percentage he'd ever shoot from the field ever in his life. He did this while shooting 63% from the foul line. He upped his rebounds per game from 12.9 to 13.5, which was a career high. He saw his assists drop from 2 to 1.5, and he saw his blocks dip a little from 2.3 to just 2 blocks a game. But that was the 6th season in a row in which Rudy Gobert would average at least 2 blocks a game. This would be the first season since 2017 in which he wasn't named the Defensive Player of the Year. But for the 4th season in a row, he was named All Defensive First Team. He was named to the All NBA Third Team for the 2nd time in a row and the 2nd time in his NBA career. And like I said, he would be named to the NBA All-Star Team for the first time ever. Once the Jazz made the playoffs, they would end up losing in the first round to the Nuggets after they were leading the Nuggets 3-1. And this was a iconic series for Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. But following, and then also worth mentioning, in 2019-2020, Rudy Gobert was the first player to contract COVID. Like, that most definitely happened. Rudy Gobert was, and there was like a joke about it, but yes, Rudy Gobert, even with all this basketball being played, that might be what he goes down and for what he's going to be remembered for. But following the 2019-2020 season that was impacted by COVID, that would lead us into this most recent season in the NBA for Rudy Gobert in his age 28 season, his 8th season with the Utah Jazz. He started all 71 of the games he played in a season where the Utah Jazz finished with a 52-20 record. He only missed 1 game this season. They would finish with the best record in the entire NBA, as they finished 1 game better than the second-place Phoenix Suns in the Western Division. This season, Gobert will go on to average 30 minutes a game, which is the lowest minutes per game he's averaged since his second year in the league. Regardless, he would average 14.3 points per game, the 3rd highest points per game he'd ever averaged in a season, below his last 2 seasons. He did all this while shooting 67.5% from the line. This would be the 2nd time he's actually led the entire NBA in field goal percentage. This would be the 6th season in which he shot at least 60% from the field on the year. He would lead the league in 2-point percentage for the very first time in his NBA career, as he shot 68% from within 2. He would lead the league in effective field goal percentage for the 2nd time in his NBA career, as his effective field goal percentage was 67.5. He would shoot 62% from the line as well. He would keep his rebounds per game level with last year, with his last season, as he averaged 13.5. He would see his assists drop down from 1.5 to 1.3, and he would see his blocks per game rise from 2 to 2.7 on the year. And he would go on to, he would go on to be named to his 2nd ever NBA All-Star game in his career. At the end of the year, literally not that long ago, Rudy Gobert would be named to his 5th consecutive NBA All-Defensive First Team. He would be named to his 3rd consecutive All-NBA Third Team, and he would be named the NBA Defensive Player of the Year for the 3rd time in the last 4 years. he would end up losing out to Giannis just last year, but he would end up winning the Defensive Player of the Year. At the end of the season, after the Utah Jazz finished with the best record in the playoffs, they would end up beating the Memphis Grizzlies, who ended up making it into that round after beating the Warriors in the play-in game. They would win that game in 5 after Rudy Gobert took over, and they would end up losing in the semifinals to the Los Angeles Clippers in 4 after the Jazz took the first 2 games, I believe. But this would also be a season where Jordan Clarkson won the 6th Man of the Year, but Rudy Gobert is one of the players in the NBA that's been able to show this incredible efficiency, consistency moving forward. Even if he isn't that much of an offensive powerhouse, he still makes at least 65% of his shots. There will be a good chance he does. No, but with that said, that's everything. That leads us to where we currently are with Rudy Gobert, one of the NBA's best players ever. At 29 years old, he is a 2-time NBA All-Star. He's made the All-NBA second team in a year in which he didn't even make an All-Star team. This first year in which he led the only year in which he led the NBA in blocks. He's made the All-NBA third team the last 3 years, proving that he is a top 15 player in the NBA, despite not being able to average 20 points per game. He is a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He's won it in 2018, 2019, and 2021. Not to mention that he's made the last 5 all-defensive first teams, and he's been named a French Player of the Year. Rudy Gobert is just an amazing defensive player who I believe is continuing to get better. I don't think he's far from being done, considering the fact that he's not 30 and he already has 3 Defensive Player of the Year trophy cases and trophies in his trophy case at home. That should really say enough. But with that said, there's not much more I can say. I want to wish Rudy Gobert a happy 29th birthday. If you ever get a chance to watch him, he's wearing number 27 for the Utah Jazz. But with that said, if you ever get a chance to watch him, please do. Thanks once again to ESPN, to the basketball reference websites, to Wikipedia and Google for the stats and figures that I needed to do this episode. And with that said, I want to thank everyone once again for listening to all 17, 18 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well, and I hope to catch you with another episode for Rudy Gobert once his 30th birthday comes around next year. Until then, thanks for listening to this piece once again, and peace out. I'll catch you next year with another bit on Rudy Gobert, if I deem it. Don't forget to say elite, and peace out. I'll catch you with another episode of The Elite tomorrow.